Broke mechanic gives biker's daughter a Christmas miracle. 12 Hells Angels transformed his life. A mechanic with nothing but lint in his pockets fixes a motorcycle for free on Christmas Eve, never knowing the girl's father would return with 11 brothers and a debt they intended to repay. What started as simple kindness became the kind of transformation that changes everything. The garage sat on the edge of Plainfield like an afterthought, squeezed between a vacant lot and a warehouse with broken windows. Eugene Frost had inherited the place from his uncle 3 years ago, back when he still believed hard work meant something. Now, 2 days before Christmas, he stood in the cold bay with grease under his fingernails and a stack of final notices on his desk that made his stomach turn. The space heater in the corner wheezed out lukewarm air that barely reached beyond 5 feet. Eugene pulled his jacket tighter and checked the thermostat mounted on the wall, knowing full well he'd already turned it as high as his conscience would allow. The electric bill from last month still sat unpaid in the drawer, along with the water bill and a letter from the landlord with words like eviction and 30 days highlighted in yellow. He'd stopped taking lunch breaks 2 weeks ago. The sandwich shop down the street had started to feel like a luxury he couldn't justify, not when he was choosing between eating and keeping the lights on. His stomach growled in protest, a sound that echoed in the empty garage. Outside, the December wind rattled the bay door and sent a draft straight through the gaps in the frame. Eugene had meant to fix those gaps back in September, but parts cost money and money had become something other people had. He'd learned to layer his clothes instead. Thermal underneath, flannel over that, jacket on top when things got really bad. The radio on the workbench played Christmas music between bursts of static. Silent night filtered through the speakers, all hope and peace, while Eugene stared at an engine he'd pulled apart yesterday for Mrs. Kowalski's sedan. She'd promised to pay after the holidays, which meant January, which meant he'd be eating rice and canned beans well into the new year if he was lucky. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Eugene pulled it out with his good hand, the one that wasn't currently stained black from wrestling with a seized timing belt. The screen showed a text from his daughter, Lily, asking if he'd be home for Christmas Eve dinner. He typed back a yes with his thumb, even though he knew dinner would be whatever he could scrape together from the apartment cupboards. Lily was 11 now, old enough to notice when things weren't right, young enough to still believe her father when he said everything would work out fine. The truth sat heavier than any engine block. Eugene's wife had left 2 years ago, taken the savings account and the furniture, and most of Lily's belief that families stayed together. He'd been fighting to keep their heads above water ever since, working 16-hour days and watching the garage slip further into the red with every passing month. The mechanical clock on the wall showed 4:30. Darkness had already settled over Plainfield, the kind of early winter darkness that made everything feel later than it was. Eugene wiped his hands on a rag that had been clean once, back when he could afford to buy new ones. He was about to turn off the bay lights when he heard it. The sound cut through the Christmas music and the wind, a motorcycle engine with a distinct misfire. The rhythm was wrong, stuttering instead of smooth, the kind of problem that meant trouble if you were far from help. Eugene walked to the bay door and pressed the button. The door groaned upward, letting in a blast of freezing air and the sight of a motorcycle rolling into the lot. The bike was older, maybe 20 years, with road salt eating at the chrome and a rider who looked too small to be operating a machine that size. The engine cut out completely as the bike coasted to a stop under the floodlight. The rider pulled off a helmet that was 2 sizes too big, revealing a girl who couldn't have been more than 13. Her face was red from the cold, eyes watering from the wind, dark hair tangled around her shoulders. "We broke down," she said, her voice shaking from more than just the temperature. "Is this place still open?" Eugene stepped out into the lot, his breath visible in the frozen air. He looked at the girl, then at the motorcycle, then back at the girl. "Where's your folks?" "It's just my dad." She climbed off the bike with stiff movements, clearly not used to the weight. "He's sick, in the hospital. I was trying to get there before visiting hours ended." The bike's engine ticked as it cooled. Eugene moved closer, already assessing the problem with the kind of automatic diagnosis that came from 30 years of turning wrenches. Oil pooled beneath the engine, dark and thick in the floodlight. "That's a Harley Softail," he said, more to himself than to her. 1999, maybe 2000. "My dad's," the girl confirmed. "He taught me to ride last summer, But I'm not supposed to take it out alone. He's been in the hospital for 3 days, and they won't let me stay overnight, and I just wanted to see him for Christmas Eve." Her voice cracked on the last words. Eugene saw her fighting to keep it together, saw the kind of desperation that came from being too young to fix your own problems and too old to cry about it. He knelt beside the bike, his knee protesting the cold concrete. The oil leak was obvious now, coming from a blown gasket that should have been replaced months ago. The misfire came from fouled plugs, and the whole system looked like it had been running on borrowed time. "How'd you get this far?" he asked. "I don't know. It started making that sound about 5 miles back, but I thought I could make it." The girl hugged herself against the cold. "Is it bad?" Eugene stood up, feeling every one of his 46 years in his lower back. Bad didn't begin to cover it. The bike needed a gasket replacement, new plugs, probably a full tune-up that would take 3 hours and cost more than this kid could possibly have in her pockets. He looked at her standing there in the floodlight, shivering in a jacket that had seen better days, with eyes that held the same kind of fear he saw in Lily's when she asked about money. The same age, roughly, the same vulnerability. "What's your name?" he asked. "Annie." "Annie, I'm Eugene." He gestured toward the garage. "Let's get your dad's bike inside before we both freeze." Together they pushed the motorcycle into the bay. Annie helped more than he expected, leaning her whole weight into the frame and grunting with effort. When they had it up on the center stand, Eugene closed the bay door and turned up the space heater another degree. Consequences be damned. Annie stood next to the bike with her arms wrapped around herself. "I don't have much money," she said quietly. "Maybe $20, but I could pay the rest later, I promise. I have a paper route." Eugene pulled out his toolbox, the red Craftsman chest his uncle had left him along with the garage. $20 wouldn't cover the parts, much less the labor. A job like this would normally run $300, minimum. He thought about the final notices on his desk. He thought about the landlord's letter. He thought about rice and beans and the electric bill and all the very good reasons he should tell this girl to call a tow truck. Then he thought about Lily, alone somewhere if he wasn't around to help. He thought about what kind of man turns away a kid trying to see her sick father on Christmas Eve. "Keep your $20, Eugene said, reaching for his socket set. "Buy your dad something from the hospital gift shop." Annie's eyes went wide. "I can't. You can't just." "I can, and I am." He moved to the bike and started removing the primary cover. "Hospital visiting hours end at 8? Yeah. Then we've got about 3 hours to get this running. You know how to hand someone tools when they ask." Annie nodded, something like hope flickering across her face. She moved closer to the bike, watching as Eugene laid out wrenches in order of size on a clean rag. They worked in comfortable silence for the first hour. Eugene explained what he was doing as he went, partly to teach and partly to fill the quiet. Annie listened with the kind of attention that told him she actually cared about the machine, that this wasn't just transportation to her. "My dad's been riding since before I was born," she said at one point, handing Eugene a torque wrench before he even asked. "He says there's nothing like it. The freedom, he calls it." Smart man. Eugene loosened a bolt that had been over-tightened by someone who didn't know better. "What's he in the hospital for?" "Pneumonia. It got really bad really fast." Annie's voice went quiet. "The doctors say he's getting better, but he looked really sick last time I saw him. Really tired." Eugene worked the gasket free and inspected the damage. Worse than he'd thought, which meant more time and parts he couldn't really afford to give away. He glanced at Annie, saw her watching with her father's eyes, and kept working. "Hand me that gasket maker," he said, pointing to a tube on the workbench. "The blue one." By 7 o'clock, Eugene had replaced the gasket, changed the plugs, and adjusted the timing. His hands ached from the cold and his stomach was empty enough to hurt, but the bike looked ready. He hit the starter and the engine turned over clean, settling into the rhythm it should have had all along. Annie's face lit up like she'd just witnessed a miracle. "You fixed it. It'll get you there and back," Eugene said, wiping his hands. "But your dad needs to do a full service soon. This isn't a permanent fix. I'll tell him." Annie pulled out a crumpled 20 from her pocket and held it out. "Please, take something." Eugene looked at the bill, at the girl's determined expression, at the bike humming with temporary health. He thought about his own pride, about Lily's dinner, about the electric bill. "Put it in your dad's card," he said finally. "Tell him Merry Christmas from the mechanic who hopes he gets well soon." Annie's throat worked as she swallowed hard. She moved forward suddenly and hugged Eugene, quick and fierce, before stepping back with red eyes. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "Get going," Eugene said gruffly. "You've got 40 minutes. He helped her push the bike outside and watched as she put on her oversized helmet. She kick-started the engine, gave him one last wave, and rolled out into the December night with the exhaust note echoing off the warehouse walls. Eugene stood in the cold for a long moment after she was gone. Then he went back inside, turned off the space heater, and locked up the garage. The final notices still sat on his desk. The landlord's letter still promised eviction. But somewhere in Plainfield, a girl was going to see her father on Christmas Eve. The next week passed in its usual struggle. Eugene worked the jobs that came in, stretched every dollar until it screamed, and watched his bank account dwindle towards zero. By New Year's, he'd started making mental lists of what he could sell if it came to that. It was January 2nd when they came. Eugene was under a Chevy pickup, replacing a U-joint that should have gone out years ago, when he heard the rumble. At first he thought it was thunder, some freak winter storm rolling in off the plains. Then the sound grew louder, more distinct, and he recognized it for what it was. Motorcycles. A lot of them. Eugene rolled out from under the truck and stood up, wiping his hands on his coveralls. The rumble had become a roar now, echoing off every surface in the neighborhood. He walked to the bay door as the first bike pulled into the lot. Then the second. Then the third. They kept coming, a parade of chrome and leather and American iron that filled his small lot and spilled out into the street. Eugene counted 12 bikes total, each one ridden by a man who looked like he'd been carved from the same rough stone. The lead rider killed his engine. One by one, the others followed suit, until the lot fell silent except for the ticking of cooling metal and Eugene's heartbeat hammering in his ears. The first man swung off his bike with the ease of someone who'd been riding since before Eugene was born. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with iron-gray hair pulled back in a ponytail and a leather vest covered in patches. The biggest patch on his back showed a skull with wings. "Eugene Frost." The man's voice carried the kind of authority that made Eugene straighten unconsciously. "That's me. I'm Curtis. These are my brothers." Curtis gestured to the 11 men behind him, each one dismounting from their bikes in a synchronized movement that spoke of years together. "You fixed a bike for my daughter on Christmas Eve." Understanding hit Eugene like cold water. Annie, the girl with the oversized helmet and $20. "Is she okay? Is the bike?" "She's fine. The bike got her there and back, just like you promised." Curtis moved closer, his boots loud on the concrete. "She told me what you did. Told me you wouldn't take her money. Told me you worked for 3 hours on a bike you knew couldn't pay you back." The other men had formed a semicircle around Eugene now, not threatening but present, a wall of leather and muscle that blocked out the rest of the world. Eugene's mouth went dry. "It was Christmas Eve," he said. "Her dad was sick. What was I supposed to do? Most people?" Curtis's eyes were the same dark brown as Annie's. "They'd have told her to call a tow. They'd have quoted her $300 and sent her on her way when she couldn't pay. You didn't do that. I couldn't." "No, you couldn't." Curtis reached into his vest and pulled out an envelope. "My brothers and I, we believe in debts, in honor, in taking care of the people who take care of ours. You gave my daughter a Christmas miracle when you had every reason not to. Now we're here to return the favor." He handed the envelope to Eugene. It was heavy, thick with something that crinkled inside. Eugene opened it with shaking hands and found cash. A lot of cash. More money than he'd seen in one place since his uncle died. "That's $10,000, Curtis said flatly. "First installment." "First, I can't. This is too much. It's not nearly enough." Another man stepped forward, shorter than Curtis but wider, with a beard that reached his chest and forearms like tree trunks. "I'm Brock. I own a construction company. You need work done on this place." Eugene looked around the garage with new eyes, seeing it as they must see it. The cracked concrete floor, the ancient space heater, the gaps in the bay door. The peeling paint and broken fixtures and all the small failures he'd learned to ignore. Everything needs work, he admitted. Then everything gets work. Brock pulled out a phone and started typing notes. We'll start next week. New doors, new heater, new floor. Whatever you need. A third man moved forward, this one lean and weathered with scars on his knuckles and the look of someone who'd seen hard miles. Name's Dixon. I know people who owe me favors. Business people. You're about to have more customers than you know what to do with. I don't understand, Eugene said, his voice barely above a whisper. Why would you do all this? Curtis's expression softened slightly. Annie told me about your daughter. Told me she overheard you on the phone. Talking about Christmas dinner. Told me you gave her everything when you had nothing to give. That's the kind of man we protect, another writer added. This one had a gray beard and eyes that had seen things Eugene couldn't imagine. That's the code. You took care of ours when she needed it most. Curtis's voice carried across the lot. Now we take care of you. That's how this works. Eugene felt something wet on his face and realized he was crying. He tried to wipe his eyes with his sleeve, but the tears kept coming. Months of pressure and fear and desperate calculation finally breaking through. I don't know what to say, he managed. Don't say anything. Curtis gripped his shoulder, the gesture firm but not rough. Just accept the help. Let us do this. You earned it. The other men nodded. A chorus of leather and agreement. One by one, they introduced themselves. Flint, who owned an auto parts store and promised wholesale prices for life. Garrett, who did accounting and offered to sort out Eugene's books. Wesley, who knew a guy at the power company. They stayed for 2 hours, walking through the garage and taking notes and making plans. Brock measured the bay door openings and cursed the shoddy installation. Flint inventoried Eugene's tools and shook his head at the worn-out equipment. Dixon made phone calls in rapid succession, each one ending with, "Yeah, he's good for it," and promises of business coming Eugene's way. Curtis stayed close to Eugene through all of it, answering questions and explaining connections. "My brothers and I," he said at one point, "we're not just a motorcycle club, we're a family, and family takes care of family." "I'm not family," Eugene protested weakly. "You are now." Curtis's smile was slight but genuine. "You became family the moment you helped Annie. That's not something we take lightly." As the sun started to set, the men prepared to leave. They mounted their bikes with the same synchronized precision they'd shown arriving. Curtis was the last to swing a leg over his machine. "We'll be back next week," he said. "Tuesday morning. Be ready to work." "I will be." Eugene's voice was stronger now, steadied by the envelope in his pocket and the promises written on notebook paper. "Thank you, all of you." Curtis nodded once, then hit the starter. The engine roared to life, followed by 11 others, a thunder that shook the windows and sent echoes across Plainfield. They pulled out in formation, a river of chrome and leather flowing down the street until they disappeared around the corner. Eugene stood in the empty lot as the sound faded. He pulled out the envelope and counted the cash again, just to make sure it was real. $10,000. First installment, Curtis had said, like there was more coming. His phone buzzed. A text from Lily. "Did you hear all those motorcycles? They were so loud." Eugene typed back, "I heard them. I'll tell you about it at dinner." For the first time in 2 years, he stopped at the grocery store on the way home. He filled a cart with real food, the kind Lily liked. The kind he hadn't been able to afford for months. Chicken and fresh vegetables and a chocolate cake from the bakery section that cost $12 and felt like a fortune. Lily met him at the apartment door with wide eyes when she saw the bags. "Dad, what?" "We're celebrating," Eugene said, carrying everything to the kitchen. "Go wash up, I'm making a real dinner tonight." They ate together at the small kitchen table, just the two of them, with the chocolate cake waiting for dessert. Eugene told Lily about the girl on Christmas Eve, about the 12 men who'd shown up today, about the plans for the garage and the promises of work. "Are we going to be okay?" Lily asked, the question she'd been holding back for months finally breaking free. Eugene looked at his daughter, at the hope fighting with fear in her eyes, and smiled. "Yeah, kiddo, we're going to be okay." Tuesday came with the rumble of construction trucks and the arrival of Curtis and his brothers. They brought tools and materials and a work ethic that put Eugene's 16-hour days to shame. Brock supervised the installation of new bay doors while Flint delivered 3 toolboxes full of equipment that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The renovation took 2 weeks. In that time, the garage transformed from Eugene's quiet struggle into something that looked like a real business. New concrete got poured. Modern heaters got installed. The electrical system got upgraded to handle proper equipment. Fresh paint covered walls that had been dingy gray since his uncle's time. Dixon made good on his promise. Customers started appearing, referred by friends who'd been referred by friends, a chain of connections that led back to the 12 men on motorcycles. Eugene found himself booking appointments 2 weeks out, then 3, then a month in advance. One evening in late January, Curtis stopped by alone. He found Eugene closing up for the night. The new security system engaged, the lights dimmed inside a space that looked nothing like it had a month ago. "You're doing good," Curtis observed, leaning against his bike. "Words spreading about your work." "Thanks to you," Eugene said. "Thanks to all of you. I don't know how I'll ever repay." "You already repaid it," Curtis cut him off gently. "You helped Annie when helping her cost you something real. That's all the payment we need. Everything else is just us making sure a good man doesn't go under because the world's unfair." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the evening traffic pass on the street. Eugene thought about Christmas Eve, about the choice he'd made to fix that motorcycle, about all the ways that single decision had changed everything. "Annie wants to come by sometime," Curtis said. "Show you her report card. She got straight A's this semester. I'd like that. She talks about you at dinner, about the mechanic who saved Christmas. Says she wants to learn to work on bikes properly, not just ride them." Curtis smiled. "You made an impression." "She made one too." Eugene pulled his jacket tighter against the cold. "How's she doing? Her dad, I mean." "You." "Pneumonia's cleared up. Took longer than they thought, but I'm good now." Curtis straightened. "Good enough to ride, good enough to work, good enough to keep my promises. That's all that matters." He mounted his bike and kicked it to life. "You need anything, you call, day or night. You're under protection now. That means something." "I know," Eugene said. "Thank you." Curtis rode off into the January darkness, his taillight disappearing around the same corner 12 bikes had turned weeks ago. Eugene locked the gate, set the alarm, and headed home to his daughter and an apartment that didn't feel quite so desperate anymore. 3 months later, on a warm April afternoon, the garage threw a grand reopening. Eugene had resisted the idea at first, uncomfortable with the attention, but Curtis had insisted. "People need to see this," he'd said. "Need to know that good things can happen." They came in numbers Eugene hadn't expected. Customers, both old and new. Neighbors from the surrounding blocks. Business owners Dixon had connected him with. The 12 brothers arrived on their bikes, parking in formation and drawing looks from everyone who didn't know the story. Annie came with Curtis, now taller than Eugene remembered, wearing a leather jacket that matched her father's. She'd brought her report card, just as promised, and Eugene displayed it on the office corkboard like it was his own daughter's achievement. Lily met Annie, and they immediately started talking about school and music, and all the things 11-year-old girls talk about when given the chance. Eugene watched them from across the lot, grateful for the friendship forming in real time. Brock unveiled a sign he'd had made without Eugene's knowledge. Frost's Garage in bold letters with smaller text underneath. Honest work for fair people. The crowd applauded and Eugene felt his throat tighten. Curtis stepped forward to speak, his voice carrying across the lot. "A few months ago, this man gave everything when he had nothing. He helped my daughter because it was right, not because it was easy. That's the kind of person we need more of in this world. That's the kind of person worth protecting." The crowd applauded again. Eugene stood next to the new sign, surrounded by people who'd become something like family in the span of a season, and felt the weight of the past few years finally lift from his shoulders. Later, as the sun set and the crowd thinned, Curtis found Eugene sweeping up paper plates and discarded cups. "You did good today," Curtis said, grabbing a trash bag to help. "I didn't do anything. You all did everything. We did what needed doing. Same as you." Curtis tied off a full bag. "The difference is, you did it first. You set this whole thing in motion. Never forget that." Eugene thought about Christmas Eve, about a girl with an oversized helmet and a father she was desperate to see. He thought about the choice he'd made, the one that had felt impossible at the time, the one that had somehow led to all of this. "I won't forget," he promised. Curtis clapped him on the shoulder. "Good. Now get home to your daughter. We've got your back from here." The brothers left as they'd arrived in formation, their engines creating a symphony of American iron that echoed through the neighborhood. Eugene finished cleaning up, locked the garage, and drove home through streets that felt different now, softer somehow, less hostile. That night, Lily asked about the future, about college funds and new clothes and all the things she'd stopped asking about when money got tight. Eugene told her the truth. Things were different now, better, they'd be okay. And in the darkness outside, 12 motorcycles patrolled the neighborhood in shifts they'd never discussed, watching over the mechanic who'd given everything when it mattered most. Protection, they called it. Family. Sometimes kindness plants seeds in frozen ground, waiting for the right moment to bloom. Sometimes a single choice ripples outward in ways we never see coming. And sometimes, when you give everything for nothing in return, the universe sends 12 brothers on motorcycles to make sure you never have to struggle alone again. If you have enjoyed the story, tell YouTube to send you more stories like this by subscribing to this channel, liking the video, and leaving a comment.